Now we're thrilled to introduce Richa Gupta, education innovator, social entrepreneur, and co-founder of Labhya. Please join me in welcoming Richa Gupta to #Education Day. Richa, welcome to #Education Day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm extremely grateful to be here and wishing you a happy International Education Day.
The first question I would like to ask you is, for those who don't know you, could you tell us about yourself and your journey?
Yes, absolutely. I'm Richa and I'm a teacher turned entrepreneur. So I spent about a decade teaching in low income classrooms across India. I started when I was 16 years old and I did that for about a decade. One of the biggest learnings I had and learned during that time, amongst many, many countless stories, was that there is a big difference between me teaching and children actually learning. I understood that so much was happening to my children who came from very difficult backgrounds back home and in their communities that they were simply too stressed to learn in the classroom. And when I dug deeper into this, I realized that almost a billion children across the world currently experience multidimensional poverty, which leads to trauma, which leads to them not being able to learn properly. And all this while, we try to solve this problem by teaching children how to read and write, when in fact, all they need is a safe space and a trusted adult. And so this was my story of being an educator, and an inflection point for me, which was a big turning point, was unfortunately in my journey, I lost two of my students. One was to community violence, and another one was to a disease that I had recovered from when I was a child. And beyond how I felt about it, I saw how this left a big mark on the rest of my students, on their parents, and the larger community. And that really pushed me to think more deeply about my purpose. And around that time is when I decided to co found Labhya, which I'll speak more about with my co founders, Vedant and Malika, to really solve for the gap in children's well being in public education systems globally.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's quite clear that you are a great example for all of us. Could you tell us more about Labia?
Yes, absolutely. So Labhya is an India-based education nonprofit, and we partner with Indian state governments to help them implement and embed a daily well-being class across all public schools of the state. So just like our children have a math, science, or English class, they now have a daily well-being or social emotional learning class every single day that is facilitated by a public school teacher. And currently, we do this in 22,000 schools across three states in India, wherein 2.4 million children daily experience this class through their public school teachers. Our ambition is to impact 30 million children by 2030. And one of the things we are doing to achieve that is not just to scale in numbers, but also fill up the gap that currently exists between social emotional learning and well being, research, and data to enable learning for children through these programs.
Wow. Well, it's really quite fascinating to hear about your work, and I love that you've shared that goal with us of reaching 30 million children through education. So, why is the International Day of Education so important to Labia?
Absolutely. So, two big reasons. Over the last 2 years, I've been one of the 17 young leaders for the Sustainable Development Goals with the UN Youth Office. And I've had the privilege to work with the ASG Youth and so many UN offices across the world in education and well being. And one of the biggest priorities that I have seen come up, thankfully, in the last couple of years is the idea of education moving from just knowing how to read and write and going to school to really
I think
building
we're
the
going to be
skills, to
short.
having a safe space, to being well. And I think that's why the International Education Day this year is so important for us, is because we see in front of our eyes that the priorities of education needs shifting from just reading and writing and doing math to really becoming a holistically well person, and a big acknowledgement globally that well-being and peace is not just a good to have in a person's life, but really a must have, especially for those who are the most underserved and at the bottom of the pyramid. And lastly, this is important because I'm so excited to see so many young people being at the center stage of decision making around education globally today.
Thank you so much for sharing, and we are so pleased to have you here and a part of this celebration of education. So, if I may ask, how important is education in relation to the manifestation of a more peaceful and sustainable world? And if anything needs to evolve in relation to this, what would it be?
So I think there is no peace without education. That is something that is very, very clear. And I was listening to all the previous speakers and how eloquently they have shared more perspectives around this from their lived experience. The one thing that needs to change in the narrative is that we sometimes feel that peace is some unattainable abstract concept when that's not the case. Peace can be achieved with skill building. And to achieve peace, we can uplift an entire generation and enable them with exceptional skills and essential skills like relationship skills, resilience, learning motivation, and so much more. And once we do that, peace becomes an inevitable part of learning growth and sustainability, not just individually for us as people, but also towards nation building, achieving the sustainable development goals, change making, and of course, poverty alleviation. And so that's how peace, education, and well being all come together in a very coherent way to make sure that we build a more sustainable world for young people and with young people.
Well, thank you so much, Richa, for articulating those goals of ours so beautifully. So, before you go, if people would like to support Labhya and your work, how can they do that?
Yes, absolutely. Firstly, please advocate for well-being in education in wherever you are in your schools, if you're a teacher, if you're in the government. Secondly, you can always reach out to me. I'm on our website, which is labhya.org. And my email is richa@labhya.org. But most importantly, think of Labhya as a thought partner in well-being and education around the world, whether it's research, implementation, or working at scale in systems change. Working on well-being is extremely important, and we would love to partner with anyone who's interested.
And I'm sure there will be many people excited to partner with you. But I have to ask you one more question, Richa. What is it that keeps you going? Where do you get your inspiration from?
Thank you so much. Entrepreneurship, especially as a young female entrepreneur, is very, very lonely. It's a very lonely journey. It's difficult to unlearn a lot of what is taught to me as a young person in India or, growing up in a middle class family. I had to unlearn a lot of what I was taught to become ambitious, to become entrepreneurial, and really to believe in myself. And some of the people that have really inspired me and helped me keep going first have, of course, been my children, the students that I teach. Who keep on inspiring me every time I feel low. I think the one thing that brings me back to the purpose is being in the classroom and talking to children and listening to what they want to do and their aspirations and dreams. The second, of course, are my team and co-founders. All of us are young people. We all have similar struggles. Being in this together means a lot to us. And the third is, of course, our advisors, the people who support us, who have trusted us with their capital, with their support and time to make sure that we are able to achieve this dream.
Well, thank you, Richa Gupta, for sharing your inspiring thoughts with us. We are so grateful for your support of hashtag Education Day and Peace One Day.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ellen.
Thank you.